Bobby Allison finally reveals the four drivers he hated most. Some men raced to win. Bobby Allison raced to survive, and to make sure the men who crossed him never forgot it. 84 wins, 3 Daytona, 500 victories. A championship built not on talent alone, but on fury, grit, and a score sheet that never got erased. But behind the trophies, behind the legends, there were drivers. 4 of them, men who pushed Bobby Allison past the limit of competition, straight into personal war. He stayed quiet for decades, not because he forgave them, because he was still racing, still had something to protect. Now, at 77 years old, Bobby Allison has nothing left to hide. 4 drivers, 4 grudges, 4 names he never forgot. And tonight, he finally says them out loud. To understand the grudges, you first have to understand the man. Bobby Allison was not handed anything. Born in Miami, raised in Alabama, he built his racing career from nothing. Local short tracks, borrowed equipment, and a stubbornness that made crew chiefs nervous and competitors furious. He did not arrive in NASCAR with sponsors lining up or media calling him the future. He arrived with talent, aggression, and zero patience for drivers who believed reputation mattered more than results. By the time his career reached its peak, Allison had collected 84 Cup Series victories, 3rd most in NASCAR history. He won the Daytona 500 3 times. He captured the 1983 championship at an age when most drivers were already planning retirement. But the numbers never told the full story. Allison raced with something deeper than ambition. He raced with principle. There was a code on the track. Earned respect. To clean competition and consequences for men who forgot both. Some drivers honored that code. 4 of them destroyed it, and Bobby Allison never forgave a single one. Number 4, Richard Petty, the king, the smile, the cowboy hat, the man NASCAR built its entire image around, and the man Bobby Allison could not stand. To the outside world, Richard Petty was the face of the sport. 200 victories, 7 championships, a handshake and a grin for every camera that pointed his direction. The media loved him. The sponsors adored him. And NASCAR protected him like he was the sport itself. That was exactly the problem. Allison watched Petty receive calls that never went his way. Watched officials soften penalties when the number 43 was involved. Watched a system that smiled at the king while grinding everyone else into the asphalt. Me on the track, it was worse. At Talladega, Petty squeezed Allison into the wall on the backstretch, a move so deliberate that Allison's crew was waiting at the pit wall before the lap even finished. No penalty, no conversation. Just the king pulling into victory lane while Allison swallowed fury that never fully disappeared. At Bristol, the contact came again. Not accidental, not racing incident, intentional. Allison confronted him after the race. Petty smiled. That smile made everything worse. Because Richard Petty never argued, never admitted, never showed a single crack in that polished public image, and that calm reaction infuriated Allison more than any wreck ever could. Bobby Allison respected hard racers. He respected men who owned their aggression. What he could never respect was a man who threw elbows from behind a smile, and then let the whole world call him a king. Number 3, Cale Yarborough. 3 consecutive championships, a body built like a linebacker, and a racing style that treated every competitor on the track like a personal obstacle that needed removing. Bobby Allison did not hate many men, but Cale Yarborough tested that limit every single time they shared a racetrack. Their rivalry did not simmer. It exploded, publicly, violently, and in front of the entire sport. The moment everyone remembers came at the 1979 Daytona 500, the first live flag-to-flag NASCAR race ever broadcast on national television. Millions of Americans watching. And Cale Yarborough chose that stage to send Bobby Allison's brother Donnie into the wall on the final lap, taking himself out in the process. Bobby stopped his car on the infield grass. What happened next was not racing. It was personal. Yarborough approached the car swinging. Bobby climbed out to meet him. Helmets were used as weapons. Punches were thrown in plain sight of every camera at Daytona. The whole country watched NASCAR's ugliest and most honest moment. Two men who genuinely despised each other finally saying it with their fists. But the hatred did not start at Daytona. It had been building for years. Lap after lap of deliberate contact. Race after race of Yarborough treating the rulebook like a suggestion and intimidation like a strategy. Allison could match aggression with aggression. What he could never accept was a man who crossed the line between hard racing and genuine recklessness, then acted like the consequences were someone else's fault. Cale Yarborough never apologized. Bobby Allison never forgot. Number 2. Darrell Waltrip. 3 championships, dozens of victories, and a mouth that never, not once, stopped running. Bobby Allison respected aggressive drivers. He respected men who raced hard and owned every inch of it. But Darrell Waltrip represented something entirely different. A driver who talked his way into positions he had not yet earned, who worked the media like a politician, who smiled at your face in the garage and then undercut you before the engine even cooled. On the track, Waltrip was dangerous in a way that felt calculated. At Martinsville, so he bumped Allison repeatedly through the final 20 laps, not racing for position, but sending a message. Every tap deliberate, every nudge personal. Allison held his line, held his temper, and waited until the checkered flag dropped. What happened in the garage afterward was not polite. At North Wilkesboro, Waltrip cut directly across Allison's nose entering the corner, a move that nearly collected 3 other cars and ended with both drivers screaming on pit road, while crew members physically stepped between them. But the real damage was never done on the track. Waltrip worked the NASCAR offices. He cultivated relationships with team owners, sponsors, and officials that gave him protection Allison never received. When Waltrip complained, people listened. When Allison complained, people shrugged. That imbalance burned deeper than any on-track incident ever could. Bobby Allison won races with his right foot and his nerve. Darrell Waltrip won advantages with his tongue and his politics. For a man who believed the racetrack was the only courtroom that mattered. That was completely unforgivable. Number 1. Dale Earnhardt, the intimidator, the black number 3, the man who turned fear into a racing strategy and called it a career. Bobby Allison faced hard drivers his entire life. He faced dirty drivers. He faced politicians and bullies and men who hid aggression behind corporate smiles. But Dale Earnhardt was something completely different. Something that kept Allison's jaw tight and his knuckles white for nearly 2 decades. Earnhardt did not race competitors. He hunted them. At Talladega, Sir Earnhardt drove Allison 3 wide into the tri-oval at 200 miles per hour, a move so reckless that the spotter stopped talking and just prayed. Allison saved it, but the message was received loud and clear. Earnhardt was not racing for position. He was establishing dominance. At Richmond, the contact came under caution, deliberate, unnecessary, and completely intentional. Allison climbed from his car and walked directly toward the black Chevrolet. What was said between those 2 men on that pit road never made the broadcast, but everyone standing within 50 feet went completely silent. Off the track, Earnhardt's legend only made things worse. Every incident got absorbed into the mythology. Every dirty move became part of the Intimidator story. NASCAR did not penalize the legend, they marketed him. And Bobby Allison watched the sport reward exactly the behavior it should have punished. But the deepest wound was never about crashes or contact. It was about respect. Earnhardt raced every driver on that track like they existed solely to be moved out of his way. Like their careers, their safety, and their dignity meant absolutely nothing compared to his next victory. Bobby Allison built his entire identity on earning respect through toughness. Dale Earnhardt took that same toughness and weaponized it without conscience. That is why he sits at number 1. Not because he was the dirtiest, but because he was the most dangerous and the most completely, utterly unapologetic about every single inch of it. Bobby Allison never needed anyone to like him. He needed them to respect him. And the 4 men on this list, Richard Petty, Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, and Dale Earnhardt, each found their own way to make that impossible. They pushed him harder than any championship ever demanded. They sharpened edges in him that never fully softened. They made every race feel like a war that went far beyond points and trophies. But here is the truth that time reveals. Rivalries like these do not diminish a legacy. They define it. Bobby Allison was not great despite these men. He was great because of them. At 77 years old, the silence is finally broken. The grudges are out. And the record, like it always was, speaks for itself. If this story hit different, subscribe. More untold racing stories are coming.